Okay. Thanks everyone for coming. And please, if you want to listen to such amazing story, please get closer. My name is Afonso, and as you can see, I have a bit of an accent. I am Portuguese, and due to COVID, I haven't seen my family in about 2 years. It's a bit sad, but one positive thing is that my carbon footprint is now lower because I can fly. And that's what I talk about today. I want to talk about a bit the habits that you can do to lower your carbon footprint. I want to talk to you about something that's called the ecological footprint, which is more a holistic approach to measuring your impacts on this planet. And then I want to go over what you can do to reduce it and reduce your climate anxiety so you can focus on the things that do matter and the things that might be matter a bit less. So I'm an environmental engineer, and I had the chance to study under someone called Tommy Wildman. And Tommy Wildman is the person who created the paper that defines carbon footprint. He's been cited more than 20,000 times. He's an amazing colleague and teacher. And my first assignment at university here in New South Wales was calculating my carbon footprint. And the exercise was we were giving a spreadsheet, with 10,000 factors that we had to add in things like what you purchase, how much time you fly, if you have a bicycle or not, where do you live, how many people in your household, what type of energy, all these things. And at the end, you were giving a number, your carbon footprint. And I was like, okay, I ride my bicycle. I don't eat much meat, which isn't bad for the environment. I don't buy many clothes. I should be on the lower spectrum. I should be fine. But then my carbon footprint was, 3 times higher than everyone else. And I was like, oh, I'm going to fail my assignment. And so I had to look again at the numbers. And the issue was that flying was bad. And I had no idea. And I chose to be an environmental engineer, but I didn't know flying was bad for the environment. And it got me thinking, okay, how can we measure this? And why are certain activities way more harmful for the planet compared to others? And that's been almost a 7-year journey on researching, learning more about those things. And I want to give you a bit of what I've learned in the meantime. I want to start by showing you this quote you might have seen before. We have borrowed this planet from our grandchildren. And this quote does two things. One is the term borrowed, instead of owning this planet, gives you a sense of where you belong, which means if you had to rent a house, you wouldn't just, redo your whole kitchen without permission or paint walls or hang pictures. You'd have to ask for permission and to see if it was okay or not. And we have to do the same thing when we ask the planet, is what we're going to do next a good thing or a bad thing? Secondly, is the time scale. We borrowed this planet from our grandchildren, which means we had to look 67 years into the future to see how those actions are going to impact in the future, because it's not just about the now, it's what's going to happen next. And to start off, I want you to look at this picture diagram about what sustainability is. Being sustainable sits, according to this graph, in the middle of the environment, economy, and the social aspect. And also by the size of the circles in this graph, it means that the units of social, environment, and economic value are kind of interchangeable. You can maybe change 2 units of something, let's say the environmental aspect and the societal aspect, and change it for the economic one. And so it kind of gives the same importance to every single aspect. Means, okay, the environment is as much as important as the social aspect. And if you were to build a dam, as an example, dam gives you renewable energies, you think, okay, there is some positive impacts on the environment, like you get renewable energy, but there's some negatives as well. When I put up my dam, there's going to be a backup of water. They're going to destroy habitats, and animals will have to leave places where they live. And on the other aspect, maybe people will have to move houses because they'll get flooded, but maybe they'll get new jobs because they have a dam nearby. So it's kind of things that we have to look into it. But a new way to look at where the environment in being sustainable means could be this. Now the circles have different sizes. society lives within the environment, and the economy is a construct of society. And the units are not interchangeable anymore, and the economy just becomes a means to get to an end. And that end is meeting human needs. We take into account the ecological constraints of those needs. So it means that not activities are not interchangeable anymore. They actually are constrained by the planet, by ecology, by nature. And that's where we have to look when we look at measures something as ecological footprint. Everyone has heard, probably because you're here on these chats, about carbon footprint. But another measurement is ecological footprint, which is a bit more holistic in the way we approach the impact of certain activities, businesses, as tiny houses or vertical gardens. Carbon footprint, a quick recap, is okay, every activity that we do emits some gases, some chemicals onto the atmosphere. They all contribute to global warming, which contributes to climate change. And those gases can vary, but today we measure it as CO2 equivalent. We add a factor to things like methane and what is the impact on that temperature increase. And if you look here at the middle of the graph, you'll see there's like a green arrow. And that green arrow means, as an example, this building, right? If we measure Caroma's impact, you'll look something at the energy that it consumes, how much water, how you get to work, the chairs that they bought, etc. But then there's a whole other aspect, which is where was this chair made? Where did it come from? And who made it? Which means now we'll have to ask someone upstream of this chair being here, okay, what kind of energy did you use in your factory? What kind of materials? What kind of polish? And where did that polish come from? And suddenly the supply chain becomes huge. And there's a lot of information and gases emitted during that process that will contribute to the carbon footprint of that chair. And when the chair is done, you'll have to put it somewhere. Maybe it's to landfill, maybe it'll recycle, maybe it'll need to get transported again. And that will also emit emissions. And so as you can see, it's not just about the chair being here, it's like what happened before the chair got here and what will happen after. And to measure those things, we use something that's called the ecological footprint. Ecological footprint, it's a rate, it's a comparison. Ecological footprint measures the speed that we consume resources and generate waste against the capacity of this planet to absorb those emissions and to remanufacture the resources that we use. As an example, you say that coal is not a renewable energy, but it actually is. It just takes 200 million years to get replenished. So if you were to take a piece of coal from the ground, mine it, and wait 200 million years, it will eventually show up there again. But at the rate that we extract coal, it becomes non-renewable. And it's the same thing with everything that we do. We are allocated a little piece of footprint that should be equivalent to the time that Earth takes to replenish the resources and somewhere to put the waste that we generate. But ours is a bit bigger. And you probably have heard of overshoot day, that we consume 1.7 planets every year, which means that it's not that we're consuming things that we shouldn't do, we're just doing it at a rate that's way faster of what the Earth is capable of generating and absorbing again. And so you go, okay, how do I reduce this impact? How do I reduce my carbon footprint, my ecological footprint? And it's not by offsetting, because offsetting today has a bit of an issue, is that a lot of projects are offsetting into the future, which means, we talk about going carbon neutral in 2050, but when you buy offsets, you're buying offsets that might take 70 years to absorb things that you've emitted today or in the past. It's not that they've already been absorbed that carbon and then you're getting sold that credit. It's actually you pay now. It's going to take 70 years, but you become carbon neutral today. And that has consequences. So scientists and researchers found a way to understand the whole impact of each activity from cattle to crate, which means from the beginning that it existed all the way until 100 years, 200 years have passed since it's been used. This is an example for the textile industry. And to make, let's say, this shirt, a piece of clothing, you'll have to extract fossil fuels, most likely, hopefully renewables. You have to manufacture the fibers at the beginning. You'll have to dye it. You'll have to finish it. You'll have to assembly in a factory, probably overseas. You have to ship it all the way to the end consumer or a warehouse. You have to ship it again, and then you start using it. And when you use your piece of clothing, you'll wash it. You maybe will dry it in a machine instead of hanging on a clothesline. And then at the end, you might dispose of it. And that where that three horizontal lines down the bottom represent what you do with the garment or with a piece of clothing at the end. And this could be a chair as well. You could either close the loop and you bring it back all the way to the beginning. You could remanufacture it, which means with clothing, you might just assembly new parts or repair a couple things. Or you could reuse it, just give it away or find a different use. And the size of those lines represent how much energy that's going to need again to bring that product back to customer use, which means closing the loop or maybe recycling something, let's say a glass bottle. You grab the glass bottle that could be used again to fill up or put plants in it as an example. And you're gonna crush it. You're gonna probably have to separate the stickers and the plastic from the glass. You're gonna have to crush it. You're gonna have to melt it again. You're gonna have to blow up the glass again, put new stickers, ship it again, fill it up with liquid, send it to the end consumer, and that's gonna consume a lot of energy. And that's why we have this friendly graph that shows the savings that some habits will do to the planet when it comes to climate change. And you see that recycle, the savings, which is the third column from the left, it's not very much. You don't save many emissions. You might save on like trash getting to the ocean, but it doesn't save much. It's because recycling kind of brings that horizontal line all the way back to the beginning. Because recycling a glass bottle, as an example, will have to go all the way back to the beginning. And you see that there's kind of like a difference on what's inside that little square and what's outside it. You know, on the far right hand side, you have having less children. You have flying less, as an example. And those things save a lot. And what's interesting about what's outside that square and what's inside it is that what's inside as a individual, you are based on companies and people making more efficient products. You're asking for people to make better lighting systems. You're asking people to make better cars that are hybrid or use renewable energy. You're asking people to find new ways to recycle items, construct items that are easier to recycle. But on outside of that square, it's just things you have to say no to. You're just saying no to flying, saying no to buying less things, saying no to, using just the normal, when you rent a new house, the normal energy provider to someone that offers you renewable energy. And that's why it's important to, yes, focus on the little things that, taking your keep cup, because those things spark conversations. But also focus on making the sacrifices and the challengings, which is saying no. It's way hard to say no than just changing a little bit of your habits. And to end it, I want to talk about something called the cautionary principle, which is today the science is not there yet to figure out every process for every item that exists everywhere in the world. So the assumption that we have to make is that everything that we'll do in the future, it's most likely harmful. And how do we prepare for that? If I'm building a dam and I don't have all the research on where it's going to impact the planet, I'm going to assume the worst. And by assuming the worst, I can prepare. I can displace more people than I need to. I can maybe try to create more jobs than what I think it will. Maybe I will try to plant more trees somewhere else that's not going to be flooded, just in case it floods more than what I expect. And the same thing when I manufacture a new product, when I create a new business, prepare for the worst, because we don't have all the information yet to see the impact that it's going to generate. And when it comes to things inside a little circle and outside of it, if it's not us who came on a rainy Sunday to chats like this to learn more about tiny houses, vertical gardens, about sustainability, then who's going to do it? And if it's not now, when we know that we're going on a trajectory of increasing our carbon footprint, that things are damaging the planet, that species are dying, then when are we going to start to act? So thank you, and say no to things that you can.
Fantastic. We do have a question from James.
Afonso, thank you. You've probably got the hardest challenge of anyone in your topic of conversation because you're calling us accountable for our consumerism.
Yeah.
In terms of products that we can look out for that soften, like if we need to buy clothing and stuff, I understand you're bringing more consciousness anyway to the whole process of even buying something new. But like hemp products, and also Damon Gamo spoke earlier about like seaweed products, and how even growing seaweed is going to invest in the farmers and the technology and then get that, out there more. So if we're investing in products that come from that, would you consider that to be outside of that cautionary approach?
Yeah. So back to this thing, the less manufacturing something needs or comes from somewhere else, the smaller these processes are going to be. So when we talk about like hemp as an example, when they do life cycle assessments on hemp products, it's way lower than like normal textiles. Of course, this looks like when you look at the ecological footprint, you look at anything from water use to land use to carbon footprint. But the issue with most of the comparisons that we do today, that something is better than the other, only looks at your carbon footprint. So the carbon footprint doesn't take a holistic view on the whole impact of something. But like example, new technologies, when you do have the chance, when you can't reuse something, try to use your dollars to invest in something that might be more expensive because technology is not there yet, like hemp, like kelp, something that's local, that might take more time. It won't be like instant to your doorsteps, because most likely they are taking less steps, but they take more time to produce. So yeah.
Scott?
I had a question with carbon offsetting. I know yesterday you mentioned using carbon offsetters that charge more. Do you have any recommended, like if you have to fly, places that you should offset with, or who you should offset with?
Yeah, so I guess it was in my question yesterday. When you buy a flight today through Qantas or Virgin, you have a little box that you can tick that costs about 60 cents from here to Brisbane. That offsetting tends to be on the lower end of the price of carbon. So you're better off finding specific services that you can manually go and mark the distance of your flight, which class are you flying, if economy, if business. That's going to cost way more than those 60 cents, because those 60 cents are based on the future projection on how much absorption a forest will bring in the future. Where if you go to more expensive service that might cost $20 to offset a flight, it's something more in the past, something that has a higher margin for error, therefore is more expensive. So if you do have to fly, if you do some, if it's Christmas times and you have to buy gifts, there's options out there that you can offset those purchases on the real cost. And that takes time. Inputting that information and kind of manually doing this process yourself using online calculators takes a bit of effort, but it's worthwhile, because at the end you're actually helping the planet. Yeah.
Wonderful. Any more questions? Or has he dazzled you with science? Any more questions?
Okay.
Does your partner have the same belief system?
Does my partner have a similar system? Not really. My partner is right there, actually. As an example, one thing in this graph, as you can see, it's, I don't know if it says eating less, plant-based diets. Has it been shown that like a plant-based diet has 80% less footprint than the average Australian diet? I try my best to stay away from meat, and I would say I'm 90% vegan. That's how I put it that way. Sometimes I'll have some eggs or some milk, but as an example, I live with a partner that will have eggs and milk and sometimes meat more often than I do, and that's fine. It's like I feel nowadays people like me that based on science they try to impose their beliefs or design to someone else, And that actually throws people off. And the best way to get them to achieve those decisions is by easing them and giving as much choices as possible with approachable brands and products and activities that you can do. So, yeah.
Wonderful. From a generational perspective, how do we inform the next generation?
Yeah, I think the best, for example, Banish, my business partner, it's the thing like, how can you take a topic like this, might be science heavy, and make it approachable for the consumer to understand. And that might be with a simple purchase that costs $15 to making a swap, or to offering programs to recycle better, or just inform that some items are bad for you, and that you can kind of infiltrate in your day-to-day life to achieve the changes inside the square, but then opening that conversation to say, actually, you can also do this that I don't provide in my brand, but these are very impactful things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any final questions, or shall we let this lovely man get on with his embarrassing his partner again? Poor thing. Would you have you got a question for him?
Put it on the spot.
No, I actually I was listening to this talk before it was made public, I guess, and I thought this was probably the most interesting part. And I think we're getting to that stage of those little things becoming more mindless, and those little changes that we can actually do easily. And I'm the same. I live far away from family, and I find it super difficult. So I think I liked your question about where do you actually go to offset a flight, or what do you actually do? What are the right choices to do in the harder bits? And I think would you say that's still to be developed, and still we need more and more solutions for that, where there's a lot of things happening in that left side, and then less things than
for example, the flying, right? Well, we're waiting on someone else to develop the technology. The technology, it's coming, using biofuels made of kelp as an example on airplanes. There's jet fuel made of kelp nowadays that you can use in the US. And those things reduce emissions by 50%. So it's going to take a while to get there, but it's like, how do people like us engage that conversation and start making the change today instead of the next, 50 years? But yes, I feel that because technology is not there, that's what research shows, the decisions need to be made by individuals like us to say no. We can't just shift the blame to someone else okay, it's going to come. Electric cars are coming, net zero flights are coming. But while they don't come, we need to say no.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am one, but still I am one, right? So please put your hands together this afternoon for Afonso. Thank you so much.